All right, excellent. So let me begin by thanking our friends and colleagues who have joined us today. Today we're launching a report entitled Switchback, Evidence of a Connection Between Political Prison Camp Kwaliso number 16 and the Punggye-ri Nuclear Test Facility, ? The question mark is very important. Jacob is going to provide the evidence and the possible explanations for the existence of this mountain road, the Switchback. This report is the 24th HRNK satellite imagery analysis publication, and the latest step in an effort by our organization, by HRNK, to create a clear picture of the evolution, current state, function, economic and security utility of North Korea's political prison camps and other detention facilities. HRNK was the NGO that put North Korea's penal labor colonies on the map in 2003 by publishing world-renowned investigator David Hawk's Hidden Gulag. This report, Hidden Gulag, was the first report ever to use satellite imagery to investigate North Korea's vast system of unlawful imprisonment. And ever since, we have employed a methodology combining satellite imagery analysis, North Korean escapee testimony, and open source information. Our satellite imagery analysis project is the result of a long and fruitful collaboration with senior satellite imagery analyst Joe Bermudez. Jacob Bogle, our report author and main presenter today, has also joined our team, and today marks his first release of an HRNK report. While Jacob provided the satellite imagery analysis, I was delighted and honored to co-author, together with my colleague Raymond Ha, HRNK Director of Operations and Research. Let me take this opportunity to thank veteran imagery analysts Al Anderson and Bobby Holt, and also our colleague Joseph Hansong Lim, who has joined us today, for his work on designing this report and the graphic design of this report. We have dedicated this report to the memory of the late Ronald Baumiller, who passed away recently. A veteran satellite imagery analyst, Ron made great contributions to our efforts to bring truth, freedom, peace, justice, and human rights to the oppressed people of North Korea. To open today's event, we have a very special guest, Dr. Shin-wha, Dr. Shin-wha Lee, who is South Korea's ambassador at large on international cooperation on North Korean human rights. She is a professor at the Department of Political Science and International Relations at Korea University, holds her doctorate, her PhD from University of Maryland, College Park, has worked extensively with the UN and the Secretary General. She has been a visiting professor at SIPA at Columbia University. She's the recipient of the 4th Nakasone Yasuhiro Award. Her research focus is on multilateral and comprehensive approaches to global security, humanitarian issues, UN peacekeeping operations, foreign policy of East Asia, and the East Asian security community. Ambassador Shin-wha Lee, it's an extraordinary honor and privilege to be hosting you today. It's 11 p.m. in Korea. I cannot even believe that you accepted our invitation to join us. Thank you so much. And now over to you, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Well, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the release of the satellite imagery report concerning North Korea by the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, HRNK. The focus of this report, notably the Punggye-ri Nuclear Test Facility and the Hwasong Kwaliso Political Prison Camp number 16, that is located merely 1.5 kilometers away, is of paramount importance. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the Greg Scarlatoiu and all the associated personnel for their tireless efforts in bringing this critical information to the forefront of the international community. Satellite imagery analysis is an invaluable tool in monitoring and understanding activities in countries that remain isolated from the rest of the world. The utilization of such imagery reveals a spectrum of issues, ranging from security threats like nuclear testing to severe human rights violation, such as political prisoner camps. North Korea, often likened to a black box due to its closed society, exemplifies the importance of such analysis. Since my appointment as an international cooperation ambassador for North Korean human rights about a year and a half ago, I have consistently emphasized that security threats emanating from North Korea, including nuclear and missile concerns, and the egregious human rights abuses against its citizens are intrinsically intertwined, what I call two sides of the same coin. So I'm very pleased to witness an increasing academic and policy-oriented voice from the South Korean and US governments and the UN and the broader international community that rightly links North Korean security and human rights issues, particularly over the past few months. Such synergy in addressing this concern is not just vital, it is imperative. The significance of satellite imagery analysis in drawing a correlation between North Korea's security and human rights issues can be emphasized through at least 4 pivotal reasons. The first, the primary advantage of such imagery is in monitoring nuclear test sites like Punggye-ri facility. By tracking the frequency and scale of a nuclear detonation, we can derive insights into the potential human rights implication for the proximate residents. If nuclear tests are mishandled or insufficient preventive measures are taken, the risk of radiological exposure escalates. Such exposures can lead to grave health repercussions, even death, directly tying it into a human rights concern, if not humanitarian crisis itself. Furthermore, any regime leader who neglects or deliberately overlooks such exposure is essentially committing a crime against humanity. Second is a regular analysis of satellite imagery allows us to track infrastructural progression. The emergence of medical facilities or mass migrants might hint at radiation exposure or other health concern connected to nuclear test. So I think the Greg's team's work today is as very important to monitor infrastructure development and related migrants. Third, beyond nuclear-related information, satellite imagery can pinpoint locations like prison camps, forced labor sites, and other potential human rights violation venues in North Korea. Documenting these sites provides a clearer picture of the extent and nature of human rights abuses in the country. This documentation can serve as a potent supplement to testimonies from defectors and witnesses, reinforcing their accounts. Particularly, such imagery acts as a compelling visual evidence, forming the bedrock for international intervention or international sanctions. The fourth, providing tangible evidence of security threats linked to nuclear site and explicit human rights violation furnishes the international community with a diplomatic edge. The visualization of North Korea's issues through satellite imagery heightens global awareness and alarm about the dire circumstances facing its citizens. This not only intensifies international pressure on the North Korean regime, but also imposes diplomatic burdens on allies like China and Russia, who often shared North Korea. Indeed, the integral role of satellite imagery cannot be overstated in understanding and addressing the intertwined concerns of security and human rights in North Korea. Under the leadership of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, the South Korean government has amplified its attention toward the issue related to nuclear testing in North Korea. Specifically, the Ministry of Unification has initiated radiation exposure tests for North Korean defectors originating from regions close to nuclear testing sites where radiation-induced damages are of significant concern. Every year, upon completion of the analysis of this test, the government plans to publicly release the result every year. As of now, the number of defectors identified for radiation exposure testing stands at 756. By March 2023, there were 796 defectors from Gilju County and its neighboring areas since the first nuclear test in 2006. Of this number, to note, the 4 individuals who underwent radiation test in 2017 and 18 have been excluded from this count. Recognizing the importance of this issue, the Ministry of Unification has not only allocated budget for next year's comprehensive radiation testing, but it's also in discussion with the Korean Institute of Radiological and Medical Science to consider expanding the scale of the testing given the limited annual testing capacity. To truly ascertain the causal link between nuclear test and radiation exposures, collaborative efforts involving experts from diverse fields and policymakers are imperative. Future actions should be based on accurate findings, leading to demands for investigation into North Korea and synchronized international response strategies. In this context, I would like to extend once again my heartfelt congratulations and gratitude to the HRNK for preparing evidence through satellite imagery highlighting the connection between prison camp number 16 and the Punggye-ri nuclear test facilities. Reiterating the recommendation of the HRNK report, let me emphasize the urgent need for the Korean North Korean regime to halt its underground nuclear test and adhere to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. They should also join the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty and provide international inspectors with unfettered access to the Punggye-ri nuclear test facility. This is essential to verify and monitor North Korea's compliance with UN resolution concerning the development and testing of nuclear weapons. Thank you.
Ambassador Shin-wha, Your Excellency, thank you very much. It was a terrific presentation. The 4 points that you make may as well be guidelines for HRNK as we press ahead with our satellite imagery work moving forward. Let me introduce the report author, Jacob Bogle. Jacob is a very well-known satellite imagery analyst. His work is highly appreciated by all of us, and especially Joe Bermudez, our senior satellite imagery analyst. He's founder of Access DPRK. He has worked with NK News Pro, the Korea Risk Group. He has looked at North Korean infrastructure, security issues, fake missile defense batteries, has been published in the Asia Times. He's been an op-ed contributor with them. Has also been a contributor to the National Interest, at the Center for National Interest. His clients have included some of the top satellite imagery analysis companies. All Source Analysis is amongst them. Earth Data Incorporated. He's also worked for human rights organizations, of course, HRNK, Human Rights Watch, and media organizations, including Asahi Shimbun, Nikkei Asia, and Radio Free Asia, which is represented today. I see 2 of our colleagues have joined today's program. Jacob, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Hello, Greg, Raymond, Ambassador Lee. It's an honor to get to share the space with you and everybody that is joining in the online audience. It's great to be here and to be able to speak on this topic. As mentioned, HRNK, of course, made its name by validating the existence and scope of North Korea's political camp system through the use of satellite imagery. And it has remained at the forefront of the human rights issue through numerous other in-depth reports. And I think that this one continues to further that great work. I am going to share my screen so everyone can see as I bounce around the different slides here. Okay, here we go. This report, of course, is focused on a switchback road within the Punggye-ri nuclear test facility, and it poses 2 fairly simple questions. One, what is the purpose of the road? And is there a connection between the test facility and the adjacent Hwanghae-so number 16, also known as the Hwasong political prison camp? To help answer those questions, HRNK reviewed 34 satellite images going back to 2005. But first, to understand why something as seemingly innocuous as a dirt path would elicit the interest of all of us, I want to briefly summarize some of its features. The first, of course, is that it's located inside of the Punggye-ri nuclear test facility, which makes it interesting by default. But secondly, it doesn't really seem to go anywhere obvious. It just winds its way up a mountainside. However, as it takes that path, it inches all the way up to the border of the Hwasong political prison camp and its estimated 20,000 prisoner population. A possible connection between the switchback and the prison camp starts to form when we remember that in other prisons around North Korea, detainee testimony is filled with reports of forced labor, and that North Korea has also used the forced labor of otherwise free citizens for various projects around the country. And there has been some public reporting that the tunnels used for North Korea's underground testing were indeed excavated by prisoner labor. So as you can see, our interest in the switchback begins to grow. Because there is currently little in the way of human intelligence sources relating to either Punggye-ri or the Hwasong prison camp, a definitive connection remains evasive. However, the switchback has a number of other features besides being proximate to the prison camp that also make it of interest. Using what is known about North Korea's history of prisoner abuse, using what is known about its nuclear program and the development of underground testing sites around the world, this report seeks to place a set of reasoned constraints on the purpose behind the switchback, from possibly providing security access to the test site's perimeter to enabling core samples to be drilled during the planning stages of Punggye-ri. The switchback's additional features, which I'll go into more detail later on, could shed light on the development of the facility as North Korea's only nuclear test site, and with future monitoring and research may help to validate or negate reports that prisoner labor from Kwangli-so number 16 was used in its construction. As you know, Punggye-ri, which is this compound right here, is North Korea's only nuclear test site. It is located at the foot of Mount Montop in North Hamgyong Province, 17 kilometers north of the village of Punggye-ri in Gilju County. Established in the early 2000s, the facility consists of 4 tunnels. 2 of the tunnels have been used to conduct the country's 6 underground tests, and 2 remain unused. Immediately east of Punggye-ri, this larger area here, is Kwangli-so number 16, the Hwasong political prison camp, which I'll refer to as Camp 16 from here on. The 2 facilities share a common boundary of approximately 16.5 kilometers. Camp 16 is one of 4 known active political prison camps in North Korea and has an estimated prisoner population of 20,000. Former guards and prisoners at other Kwangli-so facilities all attest to prisoners being subjected to harsh treatment and forced labor under dangerous conditions. The area that this report focuses on is next to Punggye-ri Tunnel number 1, also known as the East Portal, and that's highlighted by this box here. In this area is a dirt or gravel switchback road that extends for 5.2 kilometers from the testing tunnel to the perimeter of Camp 16. Although there have been no firsthand accounts from former guards or detainees at Camp 16 about this road, the road's position between the camp and the nuclear test site, as well as the alleged use of forced labor at Punggye-ri, requires us to make a closer examination of the road's purpose. HRNK has assessed that there are 4 plausible explanations for the road's existence. And remember, the purpose of this report is to place constraints on what the road may be used for. It's a baseline, and to invite continued research to understand the site further. The first explanation, of course, is that the road may be used to transport prisoners from Camp 16 to the nuclear test facility for forced labor purposes. The road may also be used to provide access along the mountainside to place monitoring equipment to gauge the effects of underground nuclear tests. Third, the road may have been used during the planning and construction stages by authorities to assess the area's geology and to determine its suitability for conducting underground tests from tunnel number 1. And fourth, the road may be used by Punggye-ri personnel to access that shared perimeter with Camp 16 to conduct security patrols. So here we can see the switchback in relation to tunnel number 1 and the other test tunnels 2, 4, and 3. I'm going to zoom in a bit so you can see more clearly. This faint line here is a switchback, and it comes up along, moves along this bend, and then here's the perimeter on the right side of the image with Camp 16. And the road moves all the way up to that perimeter. And in this image, the path of the switchback is much more clearly defined, as is the entrance to tunnel number 1. And as you can see, this isn't just some footpath that's been worn into the ground. The road was laid out and purposely cut into the mountainside, and it's capable of carrying vehicle traffic like open bed cargo trucks, which are commonly seen in North Korea and are often used to transport people. So, of course, the first plausible use is to use the switchback to transport Camp 16 prisoners to the test site. There are 2 published reports which alleged forced labor was used in the excavation of tunnels at Punggye-ri. One report comes from a June 2009 article in the South Korean newspaper Chosun Ilbo, which cites a former guard at Kwanli-so number 22, which is located in the far north of the country, who stated that prisoners from multiple camps, including Camp 16, were taken to an underground construction site at Mount Montauk, the mountain on which the tunnels are located, and that none of the prisoners who were brought here ever returned. A second report comes from a 2016 Daily NK article, which corroborates the former guard's story, with the Daily NK source stating that Camp 16 prisoners were mobilized from the very beginning when the test site was created. As we know, North Korea lacks modern tunneling equipment like tunnel boring machines, and routinely relies on human labor and basic tools to dig tunnels even to this day. So using prisoner labor in such a dangerous and secretive project fits within the context of the regime's past behavior. Additionally, using the switchback as a prisoner transport route makes quite a lot of sense when you consider that to take prisoners from Camp 16 over here to the Punggye-ri nuclear test site using the existing road network would actually require a trip of 80 kilometers and would also mean moving prisoners through downtown Kilju. With the switchback, however, again, which is right in this area, that trip only takes about 5 kilometers from the road network and the camp all the way to tunnel number 1. The switchback's path is fully traceable from tunnel number 1 up the Camp 16 perimeter. And within the camp itself, there is a patrol path used by camp guards that ends about 100 meters away from the switchback, which is a distance easily traversed by foot. So while a direct physical connection between the switchback and the guard path isn't readily identifiable in the available imagery, that doesn't rule out periodic use when necessary, such as during tunnel construction, which occurred in the early 2000s, and as alleged in the published reports, or to bring prisoners in after each nuclear test to conduct repairs and to build extensions on those tunnels. So the second plausible use that HRNK has assessed is that the road may have been used to place monitoring equipment on the surface along the path of tunnel number 1. And as you can see in this image, there is a blue dashed line. This line is the conjectured layout of tunnel number 1 as described in a 2018 report by weapons expert Frank Pabian for the website 38 North. The switchback, and again I'll zoom in here, mirrors part of the tunnel's path along here, but it also provides access to a series of branching spur paths, one here and one here, which closely follow the tunnel's layout. At the end of those paths are small platforms or cleared pads, one of which, located here, is approximately above the test chamber at the end of the tunnel. And so that opens up the possibility that the switchback's purpose was actually to provide access to these spur paths, where monitoring equipment like seismographs, radionuclide detectors, and other diagnostic and recording equipment could have been placed during North Korea's first nuclear test, which occurred in 2006 and took place in tunnel number 1. Thirdly, the switchback and the spur paths may have been used to help determine the site's suitability to conduct and contain an underground nuclear test. The planning and development stages of Punggye-ri would have required substantial geologic testing and core drilling samples to have been collected prior to the tunnel's construction. And additional geologic tests may have also been required during that construction to make sure that any faults or fissures in the rock were avoided. So I'll move back to this slide to discuss the last possibility, which is that the switchback may be used by Punggye-ri security to access this shared perimeter to conduct patrols of the area. This section of shared boundary with Camp 16 lacks permanent fencing. If you're familiar with the other political prison camps in North Korea, they are all surrounded by a network of fences and guard posts. Camp 16 has this, but in this particular area, there are no fences, which makes conducting regular security sweeps of the area rather important, particularly whenever a nuclear test is imminent, to ensure that no unauthorized persons wander inside of the test facility. And considering that the switchback is also the only identifiable path within 4 kilometers of this area that reaches the eastern boundary, it would serve as the key security feature, enabling those patrols. So just to recap, one simply doesn't build a road for no reason, right? It has been our job to look for what it is and what it isn't. The switchback doesn't go to an area for logging. It doesn't end at a military base or other facility. And knowing what it isn't allows us to start to understand what it may be used for. There is very little public information about the development of Punggye-ri, and there are no known witnesses to life inside of Camp 16. Regardless of which of the 4 explanations we've laid out for the road's purpose, and they're not mutually exclusive, the road may have been used for any or all of them at one point. Each possibility touches on important parts of Punggye-ri's development and operations, and may also serve to bind North Korea's nuclear program and Camp 16 together through the brutal use of forced labor. Situated as it is between 2 of North Korea's most intractable issues, nuclear development and human rights abuses, the importance of needing to understand the role of the switchback has been made all the more clear. HRNK makes 5 recommendations based on this report, and Greg or Raymond can elucidate more if they want, but I'll go through them briefly here. The first, of course, is that North Korea stops all underground nuclear testing and rejoins the relevant international treaties. Second, North Korea must allow international inspectors access to Punggye-ri. Third, North Korea must allow international observers into Camp 16 and the other political prison camps to assess the health of the prisoners and gather data regarding the treatment of those prisoners, including on the use of forced labor. 4, with an estimated 20,000 prisoners and several towns within 40 kilometers of the test facility, as Ambassador Lee pointed out, the health risks to the population from any accidental radiation leak are not minimal and could go on to impact those living in Japan, South Korea, and China. North Korea must adhere to all relevant domestic laws and international agreements to which it is a party regarding the protection of human health and the environment. And 5th, continued monitoring of both the Punggye-ri nuclear test facility and Hwangli-so number 16 is needed to determine ongoing activities and to establish if there are any detectable signs of interfacility operations, such as prisoner transfers. So with that, I want to say thank you again, and I'll turn it back over to Greg.
Well, thank you very much, Jacob. You covered a lot of ground. I may have a couple of questions for you. Of course, I'll give priority to the audience. That said, thank you. And we are now ready for comments by our discussant, Raymond Ha, who is my colleague. He's the Director of Operations and Research at the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. He's a co-author of 2 HRNK reports, North Korean workers officially dispatched to China and Russia, Human Rights Denial, Chain of Command and Control, Gulag Incorporated, the use of forced labor in North Korea's export industries. So the first one co-authored with me and Hyun-Sung Lee, the second one with Kim Kwang-jin, former North Korean, former HRNK non-resident fellow. Raymond has co-authored multiple satellite imagery reports and has also edited multiple HRNK reports. He graduated magna cum laude from Princeton University with a BA in politics and received an MA in political science from Stanford University. Of course, Raymond is a co-author of this report, the Switchback Report. Raymond, over to you.
Thank you, Greg, for the introduction. And it's an honor and a privilege not only to speak today, but also to have worked together on this report. I also want to thank everyone in attendance today. Thank you for your time. And especially those of you joining us from Korea, as I know it is quite late there. So I will briefly put the report in context and reiterate and emphasize some of the points that have already been raised by the previous speakers. As many of you may recall, North Korea invited foreign journalists to the apparent dismantling of the Punggye-ri nuclear test facility in May of 2018, 5 years ago. By the journalists' accounts, there was a lack of transparency throughout the trip. One team had their satellite phone and a radiation dosimeter confiscated upon arrival. During the train ride from Wonsan to Punggye-ri, the curtains were shut so that the reporters could not look outside. And there was also limited access when the journalists arrived on site. It was not possible to take soil samples, as some experts had pointed out. In hindsight, what is most remarkable about this visit is not that the facility has apparently been prepared for yet another nuclear test. Instead, we must remember the fact that the journalists were only miles away from one of North Korea's 4 known political prison camps. And to our knowledge, it may be the closest that any foreign journalist has physically come to a North Korean political prison camp. What today's report shows is not definitive proof that forced labor from Camp 16 was used at Punggye-ri. Rather, the report offers visual evidence of a physical connection between 2 facilities that are arguably among the most tightly controlled and sensitive sites within North Korea. Given the nature of these 2 facilities, it is reasonable to presume that the switchback must have been constructed for an important purpose, as Jacob emphasized already. And it may even be the case that forced prison labor from Camp 16 was used to build these switchbacks in the first place. We do not have testimony, we do not know, but it is certainly plausible. What we can see from the imagery is that the switchback has been there since at least 2005, and it is also visible in the most recent imagery reviewed and analyzed for this report. In other words, the switchback has been there throughout the time that North Korea has conducted its 6 nuclear tests to date. So the switchback demands an explanation. This report today presents several hypotheses based on our knowledge of practices at North Korea's political prison camps, nuclear testing, the nature of the local terrain, and also the road network in the area. There may be other explanations as well, and we will not claim that these are exhaustive. They are simply plausible. And we need further monitoring and investigation. We are limited by the fact that we do not have first-hand testimony and we do not have on-the-ground access. North Korea denies the existence of political prison camps altogether, including Camp 16. Today's report differs from previous HRNK satellite imagery reports in that it primarily addresses a connection between a detention facility and an external facility, rather than focusing on changes within the prison camp itself. That said, it is important to remember that our analysis of the switchback in this report depends on our finding that Camp 16 is an operational political prison camp. This finding is based on a, quote, baseline satellite imagery analysis of Camp 16 that was published in 2015, as well as other open source reports. In the absence of recent first-hand testimony from survivors or other witnesses, satellite imagery plays an especially vital role in analyzing Camp 16. And as Greg mentioned during the introduction, ever since HRNK published David Hock's Hidden Gulag in 2003, we have combined satellite imagery, witness testimony whenever it was available, and open source information to monitor and document North Korea's detention facilities. This includes not only the Gwanliso political prison camps, but also the Gyohwaso long-term prison labor facilities. And in the future, we are also seeking to expand the scope of the analysis to examine other types of detention facilities. Each and every one of HRNK satellite imagery reports, including today's report, is an effort to leave evidence in the public record about the existence and operation of these facilities, despite Pyongyang's denials to the contrary. it will be critical to accumulate this information, not only for accountability and transitional justice purposes, but also for planning humanitarian access to these detention facilities. Until, and possibly even after, it is possible to have direct access to these facilities on the ground, satellite imagery will continue to be essential in understanding what the UNCOI called in 2014 the grave, widespread, and systematic violations of human rights in North Korea. North Korea's modus operandi of human rights denial permeates every aspect of what the regime does, and the nuclear program is no exception. And our report seeks to highlight a physical connection between Camp 16 and Punggye-ri. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Greg. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Raymond. Let me invite our distinguished participants to ask questions. Please use the Q&A function if you have a question. Jacob, may I go back to you and ask you, so the switchback is 5.2 kilometers long. How long would the trip be if the switchback were not there and one were to use the established road network from Camp 16, from the coalition number 16 to the nuclear testing facility at Punggye-ri, Tunnel 1, or any other area?
Right. One might expect that the trip would be short, but with North Korea's road network, the trip itself would be 80 kilometers one way.
Wow.
Leaving from Camp 16, you have to drive south about 40 kilometers, hit Gyeongju, and then move all the way back up. So the switchback would provide a much more rapid means of transporting prisoners over to the nuclear test site.
80 kilometers, that's exactly 50 miles.
Yeah.
It's very long.
Given what we know about the condition of the road network and the vehicles used and everything, this would be a multi-hour trip with, prisoners and people being able to see them, they being able to see the outside world. You have to provide guards and all of the rest of it. It makes a lot of sense to put a shortcut in there.
Excellent, thank you. Ambassador Shin-wha.
I'm kind of preparing for conference or meeting with Korean NGO academics and policymakers on the linkage between nuclear testing or test site or radiation exposure. We would like to see a connection for that. We have some kind of brainstorming meeting here and there. And one NGO representative speculated that Yodo camp, which housed about 30,000 people, was closed, right? And they assumingly went to the Hwasong Gwaliso, Camp 16. But your report suggested at least 20,000 people were on the Hwasong before. And but according to that NGO whom I talked with, he said there could be as many as 100,000 there now because the Hwasong site is increasing. But in your satellite imagery, I have a question. Do you only see the scale or size of the facility, or do you virtually actually see moving objects, including people? If you can only see the size of the facility or very blurry ideas about a moving object, whatever it is, there is at least 5 whole differences between number 20,000 and 100,000 in terms of the facility size. So is your satellite image still think it's only more likely to be 20,000?
I have not yet gone and try to estimate the prisoner population today. But with the satellite resolution that is available, you absolutely can see individual housing units. Sometimes you can see individual people. And so it should be fairly straightforward to determine if there was an increase over time in the campus population.
And if I may, Jacob and Ambassador Shin-wha, it's not easy to determine the number of detainees at a sprawling detention facility using satellite imagery only. The human intelligence element is very important. So we know the least of all camps. We know the least about Camp 16. As Jacob mentioned, there are no witnesses. The one camp that we used to know a lot about was Yodok, the one that was shut down, because that was the place where former senior officials who had been purged were imprisoned, and we did have quite a few witnesses coming from Yodok. Now, at a facility such as Camp 25, which resembles more a penitentiary, there are ways to have a fairly accurate approximation of the number of prisoners, the structure of the buildings, the number of rooms inside a certain structure, the number of people who sleep inside the same room based on North Korean escapee accounts. At 25, it's possible. At 16, it's quite challenging, especially in the absence of witness testimony. We quote 20,000 as the number at Hwasong in our report. But thank you for sharing this. We'll have to look into this and see if we can find a way to determine whether the camp population has increased to 100,000. We do have a question from the audience. Our good friend Chamin Anderson from Radio Free Asia. Thank you for your presentation. Has there been any recent expansion of that switchback observed in satellite images during North Korea's preparations for its 7th nuclear test?
There hasn't been any obvious expansion. As you say, we've been waiting for a new test for 18 months, 2 years. The original tunnels were all constructed in the early 2000s, so the bulk of the work was already done. What has been happening more recently is repairing the damage from when North Korean authorities allegedly blew up the tunnels, fixing any damage that may have occurred just from settling and groundwater penetrating the tunnel. So you wouldn't need as many laborers working on the tunnels and making those fixes, preparing it for a future test. So there hasn't really been a need either way for the switchback to change or expand.
Thank you, Jacob. I thought that a very important point you made, Raymond, is that in order to investigate the camps, one needs a comprehensive approach. Of course, so far, we have been very sharply focused on the camps. The camp perimeter was going on inside the camps, of course, the chain of command and control. But I'm stating the obvious when I say that, well, okay, in order to understand North Korean human rights, one has to take a comprehensive look at, well, North Korean infrastructure, economic, social, political issues. One has to understand South Korea as well. So I think that was a very important observation. Ambassador Shin-wha, you mentioned this South Korean NGO that will collaborate in this effort to look at radiation levels, changes at Camp 16, a possible increase, a dramatic increase, quite frankly, from 20 to 100,000 in the camp population. Does this NGO have sources? Do they have witnesses? Do they know former prisoners? Do they know former guards? Do they know former officials who used to be involved with running camp number 16? The reason why I'm asking is that this is really something that's lacking, the human intelligence as far as 16 is concerned.
I cannot speak for that NGOs, but as I said, we are preparing for some conference and having a brainstorming meeting. A major one will be taking place this coming Friday, and I'm gonna ask him more details. But when I had a phone conversation as a part of a brainstorming, he said he got some I think it's more or less a speculation based on his in-depth talk with defectors who's been defected since 2006, or including even the recent ones. So I don't think he has a detailed one. That's why I think we need a very concerted cooperation among those NGOs who collected the defectors' accounts, and maybe to satellite image who can give us some clear idea. And I think even the medical doctors or scientists who can making some kind of scientific proof or scientific explanation in how the nuclear test and the radiation exposure is closely related. So all those can get together. I think we can get some ideas. So that's what I can offer, Greg, for now. But if I can have one related question what I said before, and which might be also related to what you said, is yes, whether like it is 20,000 or 100,000 people there. Obviously it's a lot of people, right, near a nuclear test site. But if they have been exposed to radiation since the 2006 when the first nuclear test was conducted, they must have been exposed from the time of preparation period, right? Even before then. And this fact is widely known this is not widely known to the international community at all. So we just start to bring up this issue, unlike the Holocaust. Remember the Holocaust where the Nazi killed so many people in gas chambers for a short period of time. So the international community recognized that as a crime against humanity or Holocaust. But this crime of slowly killing many people in North Korea, I think it is also very serious crime against humanity. Then how we, international community, either NGO or governments or international organization, can do something for this, what I call hidden Holocaust. So this is the kind of thing I want you, that the Greg's teams can bring up the issues. So I start to talk, I start to advertise your effort about the satellite imagery things. I think that will be one of the very important, I would say, scientific way to accumulating evidence about this unknown or hidden Holocaust.
Basti, Shin-wha, thank you very much. There's an element of human experimentation on human subjects. Of course, we've had reports before. Indeed, this amounts to crimes against humanity, and it all boils down to access. International civil society has been requesting access, in particular humanitarian access to detention facilities in North Korea for many, many years. Interestingly, I'm sure you recall the previous UPR, the 2019 Universal Periodic Review. Ireland recommended to North Korea that it grant humanitarian access to the most vulnerable segments of the population, including people in detention. And very surprisingly, the DPRK, North Korea, said yes, okay. Of course, they're not referring to the Kwalliso political prison camps such as 16 or Yodok. They've never admitted to the existence of these camps. However, they do admit to the existence of the Kyohwa-so re-education for labor camps. So perhaps that's a point of contact. Perhaps that's where we can begin. And of course, ultimately, we do need ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross, access to these camps, eventually including the Kwalliso, in order to determine the humanitarian health, food insecurity status of the prisoners. And of course, this very important issue that you raised, the issue of possible human experimentation and exposure to radiation. So thank you very much. Jacob.
If I could jump on that. So there's been one confirmed containment failure and a second probable containment failure where radiation was detected in international airspace by aircraft. And of course, these things, when there's a containment failure, you don't just have one whiff of radiation come out and then it's over. In the United States and the former states of the Soviet Union, where there's been underground testing, we're still dealing with the fallout, groundwater contamination, decades later. So you have radiation will continue to be released from cracks in the rock. radioactive gases, and you can also have contaminated groundwater. Camp 16 comes right up the side of the same mountain that's being tested in. Any water that flushes off the surface and from the groundwater, if there is contamination that's flowing into Camp 16, those prisoners are drinking that water. They're using it for irrigation. So yeah, this is a long-term problem that's already happened long-term. And looking forward, as long as this camp is open, the people that live there, that are forced to live there, are going to experience some level of radiation contamination.
Ambassador Shin-wha mentioned the Holocaust. We have barely scratched the surface of the human rights violations and crimes against humanity being perpetrated pursuant to policies established at the highest level of the Kim family regime. And Camp 16 may be at the very core of these egregious human rights violations based on what we have seen so far. Jacob, a question for you. In terms of satellite imagery analysis, in terms of the resolution of the satellite imagery analysis, you mentioned earlier that, of course, there is a certain resolution available in the classified realm. There is a certain resolution available in the unclassified, in the open source realm. And of course, that's what we work with. We don't have any clearances or anything like that. So we just work open source. Where do we stand right now? How many pixels per meter? How has the available resolution evolved? The resolution available to groups such as ours, and what is your prediction for the future? We hear about these small satellite imagery companies, suborbital satellites. So how far have we come, and where are we headed in terms of having improved access to the satellite imagery? As Ambassador Shin-wha was asking, perhaps someday we'll be able to see people inside these camps. We have been able to do this once, see shadows, people, in one of our reports. But, I was just curious, what's your prediction?
Excuse me, to build on your question, excuse me, Jacob, how many people, maybe not people themselves, but can you tell from your satellite imagery interpretation, like your work estimate a capacity of 20,000? I'm just keep asking, but I think
Right.
going to be important for me to know the scale, because 20,000 and 100,000 is a quite different scale, right?
Right, they would be a very different scale. The 20,000 number originates with Amnesty International. And it's derived by looking at the number of what are identified as housing units, how many people could theoretically fit in there. You can use, since there isn't any firsthand accounts of Camp 16, you can use the testimony of former detainees in other camps, when they describe the living conditions. You might have a building that outside of the camp might only hold, 4 or 5 people. Inside of the camp, it might hold 20. But that's where the number originated, was Amnesty International. As far as the capabilities of satellite imagery and where we're going in the future, presently, commercial satellite imagery, you get in the 0.5 to 0.3 meter range. So per pixel, you can see something half a meter in size. That enables you at that scale. If you think of looking at a person, straight on, I'm half a meter, right? And you see just these little dots or stick figures. At Punggye-ri, in a number of images at the different facilities within Punggye-ri, you can see formations of personnel. Now, for those particular images, it's most likely that they're military or scientists, something like that. They're not prisoners, most likely. During the construction phase, however, in the early 2000s, if we could get additional imagery or older imagery, I've estimated that around 500 individuals would be needed per tunnel. So that's people working at the face of the tunnel doing the building, and carpenters and managers, and everything that you need to make it work. those numbers you could see, if there were people outside, you would be able to see people going about their business, crawling over the spoils piles, working trucks and equipment. One of the problems, and it's gotten a lot better, but as far as access to imagery, one of the problems is how often an image of a particular area is taken. If you look at Google Earth, what's available on Google Earth, you might have one area gets an updated image every month. Another area might not get an updated image for several years. And I've actually gone back and tried to find through other providers images of certain places in North Korea, and even they didn't have an image for several years. So the areas that are more populated, that have more, I hate to say it, more popular appeal, like satellite launching facilities, those will get updated more often. Punggye-ri and Camp 16 is in a mountainous, remote part of the country. Particularly the prison camp itself, there doesn't get updated very often. The satellites don't move in that direction very often. So as we have more companies come online, more satellites put up, that's going to dramatically increase the coverage area and our ability to not just see changes to structures over time, but we can also start to build up a picture of the movement of people and vehicles, the type of activity level. You can start to build up that picture.
It's a great point, Jacob. And Joe Bermudez, several years ago, began looking at archived imagery. For decades, our satellites were not looking for prison camps and human rights violations. They were looking at the very hard security issues, weapons, missiles, gear, hard gear, and stuff like that. And then you realize that by looking at those pictures, sometimes you have the opportunity to take a glimpse into parts of the imagery that are relevant to our work. So looking at archived imagery can also yield some treasure troves when it comes to investigating the camps. Raymond, very quickly, what are our plans on the publication of further reports employing our satellite imagery methodology?
So coming down the pipeline, we are working on a report on Camp 18, which we hope to have out shortly. And we also have a couple of updates coming up on other facilities, one 관리소 and one long-term prison labor facility.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Please stay tuned, more soon. Let me thank all those who joined us today. We highly appreciate the attention you pay to our work and mission. Ambassador Shin-wha, you have been extraordinary as always. I'm sorry to have kept you up until midnight. It's been very kind of you. Your remarks have been really helpful, again, in terms of mapping out the way forward. Jacob, thank you so much. Terrific report, terrific presentation. And Raymond, thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed the event. I hope everybody else has. Have a wonderful day. Have a good night. And we will see you, hopefully, at our next report launch. Whether that's going to be virtual or in person, we do not know yet. Please stay tuned. Thank you very much. Goodbye.